Well, and Gloria Borger joins us now, along with former press secretary for President George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer, and RedState.com's Eric Erickson. Well, Gloria, looked like quite an interview there. I mean, you know, as the congressman said, it's not the first time he's faced questions about all this. But when you spoke to him today, he still doesn't seem quite ready to answer them, obviously, did he?
Well, there seems to be a bit of a conflict. You know, on the one hand, he said that he read them on occasion, and then on the other hand, he said that he did not read the most incendiary ones. So it's really unclear what kind of editorial relationship, if Ron Paul had with this report that bared his name. He says that it's irrelevant. That was 22 years ago. He clearly doesn't want to talk about it, but honestly, that's the kind of scrutiny you have to expect if you're the front runner in a presidential race.
Yeah, I mean, it's politics, no question. And Eric, I mean, to that point, some people are hearing about this for the first time, but these questions are not new. They don't seem to have had much of an impact on his presidential hopes until now. Well, why not previously?
Well, because no one took him seriously previously, and now he's in first place in Iowa. I got to tell you, I remember the good old days of 2008 when his supporters put my home address and phone number on a neo-Nazi website. And, you know, we don't have to go back to the letters. We can ask Ron Paul why 4 years ago he allowed neo-Nazi websites to fundraise for him. We can ask him why 3 years ago he went on Iranian TV to say that Israelis had set up concentration camps to indiscriminately kill Palestinians. I mean, there's a lot we can ask him, but I think a more relevant question is, if we can't go back and ask him these questions from the late 80s and early 90s, why then can he go back to the 90s and attack Newt Gingrich or Mitt Romney or Rick Perry for things they wrote? It. Does he believe this is a legitimate double standard?
And a lot of people are saying, well, what does it all mean? What's the impact? And Ari, let me ask you that. I mean, first of all, take a look at this poll, if you will, of likely Republican Iowa caucus goers. Ron Paul, as Gloria pointed out, is a top pick, 28% of the vote. Newt Gingrich is up there with him, about 25%. Romney and Perry are the only other two candidates who cracked double digits. I mean, Ron Paul has some of the most dedicated supporters out there, and in a caucus state like Iowa, that can make a big difference. If he wins Iowa, what do you think it means going forward for the whole field?
Well, I think if he does win Iowa, it really doesn't mean much. Mitt Romney is probably cheering for him to win Iowa because then it's going to propel Mitt Romney forward. Nobody thinks Ron Paul can go anywhere. What really happens here is Iowa being a very small caucus state, 110,000 voters, perhaps 120,000 voters. Small, energized plurality can make all the difference in the world, and that's what propels Ron Paul's candidacy. You know, as anybody who's read my tweets know, I'm not a supporter of Ron Paul. I'm not a fan of Ron Paul. As much as I'm neutral in the primary, Ron Paul is a fringe candidate, and I don't think Ron Paul represents the Republicans' best foot forward. And so I'm bothered by all this tremendously on the merits of it and on the impact his image could have coming out of Iowa as a Republican winner. But also, 4 years ago, and I just looked this up, he got 10 percentage points, 8% in New Hampshire, 4% in South Carolina, and 3% in Florida. Iowa's historically been his strongest state. He ran before. Remember, not just Mitt Romney who ran, Ron Paul ran, and Iowa was his high water mark. He plunged from there on.
You know, Gloria, go ahead, Eric, go ahead.
Well, you know, I think there's another relevant point here that needs to be asked of Ron Paul. If you go back to these writings, one of the things that was in one of these writings, the Ron Paul Freedom Report, that had no byline, was written in first person as if it was from Ron Paul, was that gay men were trying to intentionally infect the American blood supply by giving blood donations while having AIDS and to infect the heterosexual population. Ron Paul's supporters frequently attack Barack Obama for sitting in Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church. And Barack Obama has denied ever hearing Jeremiah Wright sermons. How is Ron Paul's denial of knowing these things any different from going after Barack Obama for the Reverend Wright matter? There is none. They can't defend that.
Well, I mean, and again, to be clear, the congressman has disavowed all of these remarks. I read some of those same remarks as well. Gloria, I mean, you talked to him today. Let me ask you this, if you can comment on what Eric said, but also, what does this mean for the Iowa caucus in general? I mean, he's at the top, despite all of this news that's most recent.
Well, you know, I mean, I spoke with the governor of the state of Iowa, Governor Branstad, yesterday about this, and I said, what if Ron Paul wins? Establishment Republicans are saying if Ron Paul wins, the Iowa caucuses are completely irrelevant. And, of course, he doesn't want that to be the case. So he says what's important is who comes in second and who comes in third. Of course that's important, but as Ari Fleischer says, this is not the message the Republican Party wants to be sending. But I'll tell you this. I was at a Ron Paul event earlier in the day. It was a full house. And the message that resonates here is a message of anti-Washington, anti-big government, anti-debt, anti-deficit, anti-establishment. And it works with voters who are angry about the economy. So there is a real connection here with the voters in Iowa.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see where the ads go from here and certainly what happens over the next several days. Wish we had more time to talk about it. Appreciate your time, Eric Erickson, Ari Fleischer, Gloria Borger.